call to order the September 10th meeting of the Cary Town Council. I want to thank you for joining us from your home this evening as we continue to follow the governor's state of emergency orders. We are streaming tonight's meeting virtually. The majority of council is present here with me tonight. We had all our temperatures checked before we entered the chamber. And as you can see, we have adjusted our seating arrangements to maintain proper social distancing. Each person has been given hand sanitizer and a mask to use as they deem appropriate. To meet the requirements of the remote meetings law, we have one council member, our Mayor Pro Tem, participating remotely through WebEx. Councilmember France, can you hear me? And thank you for joining us.
I can hear you. Hope you can hear me.
I can hear you just fine. All right, the first order of business is the ceremonial opening, and I'll recognize Councilmember Robinson for that.
Great, thank you so much, Mayor. Before we pledge allegiance, I do want to bring up the matter of the 2020 census. As all of you know, it is critically important that our citizens and anyone living in our community, which are our citizens, whether you rent or own, fill out the census. And right now, we only have a 78.6% response rate. So we're trying to get that up to at least 82%, which is why we're reaching out to the community with extra posters and flyers and the Bud newsletter and social media. But I'm hoping that people will get the word out. If you know someone who you think may not have filled out the census, or just ask all your friends, or if you're in a group, ask everybody if they filled out the census and remind them to do that. I think one of the most important aspects of it is that a lot of people who rent feel like, well, I just moved here, or I'm kind of transient, I don't know how long I'm going to stay, and they may not fill out the census, but we want everybody to do it. It's required by law, which a lot of people are not aware of. So if you are new to the country, you may not know that the U.S. Census, when it's taken, is required. So fill out that form and get it in. My understanding is that if you don't self-report, then somebody's going to come to your residence and try to help you report. So it's probably to your advantage to go ahead and take care of it now. Some people may think, oh, I didn't know that was that important, and so I threw away the census form that came in the mail way back in the spring. If that's the case, you have a lot of different options. You can go to my2020census.gov and get the form there and fill it out. Or you can call the Census Bureau, which is 844-330-2020. Isn't that cute? Again, that's 844-330-2020. So I just want to pass on an encouragement to everybody that they fill out the census and make sure that we get you counted. It means a lot to us because we're going to get our funding from the state and federal government based on the census results. In addition to that, it determines how many congressional representatives we have and how districts are done. So we have a lot of importance riding on an accurate census. So thank you. Now, if you all would join me in pledging allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's all right. It's a crazy world right now.
First order of business is to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. We have a roll call vote. I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Yerha.
Aye.
Councilmember Liu.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
I vote affirmative as well. It's unanimous, and we have adopted the agenda. We now move to recognitions, reports, and presentations, and I'll call on our town manager for that report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. For my update tonight, I want to thank Chief Tony Desmondts, our police officers, the Wake County District Attorney's Office, and the rest of the team for doing what it took to make an arrest last night in Cary's first and hopefully only murder of the year. I also want to thank you, Council, for trusting and supporting them and giving them the time, space, and resources they needed to do their work. Properly conducting a homicide investigation is among the most complex, sad, and important work that is done in local government. It's also the most confidential. It has to be. The law requires it. When these cases happen, especially in this social media age of instant gratification, people want, and often even expect, constant updates. But that can't happen. More than any other time, everything we do, everything we say matters, and they matter in the starkest of terms. We must follow the law and be focused on justice. And justice, in terms of final resolution of a case in court, can take years. We've all heard this before, but it bears repeating. These things don't play out in real life like they do on television. That is, with one exception. In Cary, we do have an incredible track record of solving crimes. In closing, I just want to take this opportunity to say that I'm proud of our police department, and I'm grateful for their willingness to put my safety, the safety of my family, and the safety of this community above their own. That concludes my update for tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stiegel. We now move to our third item, Public Speaks Out. Instructions for submitting comments for our Public Speaks Out were attached to the posted agenda. Participants had the opportunity to send comments through email, the 311 online portal, and regular mail. All comments received before noon today were emailed to council, and a printed copy was given to council at tonight's meeting. At this time, I'll open up Public Speaks Out, and I'll call on staff to summarize comments we've received.
We've received one comment from Mary Collins, opposition to the rezoning 19 REZ 27.
Thank you. We have one person on the line to speak. Each of our speakers have 3 minutes for their comments, and I'll be watching the timer at our clerk's desk to make sure that we enforce that, to be fair to all of our speakers. And I'll call on the clerk to recognize the first speaker.
Our first and only speaker tonight is Jamie Swidler. Jamie, would you please confirm that you're the right speaker by giving your name and address?
Jamie Schwabler, 301 Fayetteville Street.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Jamie Schwabler with Parker Poe. I wanted to take just a few minutes to address 19 REZ 16, the Silverton PDD amendment before you tonight, and to summarize the changes we've made since the public hearing before you in February, especially with respect to new environmental commitments on this small 60-unit project. First, we increased the rear buffer from a type B to type A, where a buffer would not otherwise have been required. We committed that understory trees in the streetscape will have a minimum height of 10 feet at installation, and we included twice the amount of community gathering area required by code. Together, these make for a more heavily buffered perimeter with more substantial green space on a small 2-acre site than the code would otherwise require. Second, we are committing to a menu of energy efficiency measures in construction, fixtures, or amenities, including options to install 2 electric car charging stations and provide on-site composting for residents. These energy efficiency measures reduce waste and lower emissions and coincide with Sing's own energy efficiency program for residents. And third, we will install wiring and conduit to accommodate future solar panel connections in the building. We believe this condition is the first of its kind in Cary, and we are excited about how this project can serve as an important step in examining how development projects can incorporate solar. We have worked with staff to create this condition in response to concerns following the public hearing, and we are excited to continue working with the town through site plan. In sum, these measures exceed Cary's current standards on energy and an environment in a way that can make a meaningful difference for years to come. In addition to the reasons that staff recommends approval tonight, we believe these measures make this project a net positive for the town of Cary. Thank you.
Thank you. And since there are no other speakers,
Correct.
we'll conclude Public Speaks Out and move to our fourth item. Our fourth item is the consent agenda. And for the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, I'll take a moment to review our consent agenda items. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of the items. On the consent agenda, we have minutes. Calling for public hearing for 20A02 SXCW Properties 2 LLC annexation and Raleigh-Cary agreement regarding future common municipal boundary. 20A05 Ritchie annexation. Establish a pre-qualifier town policy to be used for the downtown Cary Park and other future projects. consideration of an automatic mutual aid agreement between Cary and the City of Durham and Town of Cary Fire Department. Ratification of adoption of the resolution of the Cary Town Council authorizing amendments to funding appropriation for purchase of 4224 Green Level West Road. Would council members like any of these items pulled for discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
No.
So moved.
There's a motion
Second?
and a second. Roll call vote starting with Mayor Pro Tem France,
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Yerha.
Aye.
Councilmember Lou.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
I vote affirmative, and the motion is approved unanimously. We now move to public hearings. Our first and only public hearing is an annexation hearing for 20A06 Lennar Carolinas LLC. Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this annexation tonight, and the item will return to council at a future meeting for action. Ms. Grannon.
Good evening, Mayor, and good evening, Council. For your consideration this evening is a request for annexation of 13.23 acres located at 1612 Cavalcade Drive. It's approximately 850 feet east of Green Level Church Road, and it's adjacent to the Ridgefield Farm subdivision. This annexation includes 8.4 acres of intervening right-of-way. The property is contiguous to Cary's corporate limits and located in Cary's ETJ, and is zoned residential 8 conditional use. The request is associated with a development plan that proposes a residential subdivision of 23 lots on the 13-acre property, which is consistent with the zoning that was approved in 2019 that limited the use to detached residential with a maximum density of 2 dwelling units per acre. The plan is currently in review and based on the provisions of the Land Development Ordinance may be approved administratively by staff once it's determined the plan meets all the applicable requirements of the LDO. In accordance with the LDO, the property must be annexed before the property development plan can be approved. Following the public hearing, staff recommends that council defer action on the annexation to a future meeting. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant has advised staff that they concur with this presentation. They do not have any comments at this time, but they are available and on the line in the event you have any questions about the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. Now is the time for the public hearing for 20A06 Lennar Carolinas LLC annexation. There were no submitted comments nor call-in speakers, and I'll check one last time to see if we have a call-in.
No call-in speakers.
So we have no call-in speakers as well, so I'll close the public hearing and open it up to council members for questions or comments. Any questions or comments? I'm seeing no shaking heads. And so, as stated earlier, this annexation will return to council at a future meeting. Thank you, Ms. Grannon. We now move to our discussion items. Our first discussion item is Intersection Improvement Project Bid Year 2020 Bid Award, and it will be presented by Mr. Nazarati and Mr. Spencer. Council may take action on this item this evening. We'll start off with Mr. Spencer.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. We are here tonight to discuss the bid award for the Intersection Improvement Project Bid Year 2020. However, since bid award staff reports are not nearly as exciting as most other staff reports, we thought we'd take this opportunity tonight to share with you what goes into developing these projects and the path staff takes to identify, collaborate, design, and construct these projects. I'll start tonight by describing our Intersection Improvement Program, the efforts that go into developing these projects, and finally, we will finish up with your approval of the bid award. Before I continue with this presentation, I just want to clear up any confusion from the beginning. This bid award is not to be confused with the Intersection Improvement Project that is funded by the Shaping Cary's Tomorrow bonds. We will share a little information on that project later on in the presentation. In order to provide the best experience for Cary citizens and road users, the goal of our transportation network is to move people and goods as safely and efficiently as possible. Our intersection improvement program has created valuable opportunities to address significant congestion and safety concerns at some of our most important intersections. So what is our intersection improvement program? This is a data-driven, collaborative effort to identify intersections or corridors that are struggling with congestion or safety issues. We've been reviewing the operation of all intersections in Cary for over 15 years, using traffic volume data we collect and traffic signal timing we develop. This data is programmed into a microsimulation software that provides outputs on level of service, amount of delay experienced, travel time, fuel consumption, and many other data points for the entire Cary transportation network. Additionally, we use safety data from a variety of sources, including data from our Cary Police Department and NCDOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program to determine which intersections need some additional attention to address safety. Feedback from our citizens also plays a vital role in our selection process. And with the use of 311 now, we have another tool to help us identify those higher complaint areas. As a result of this process, we can identify poorly performing intersections and develop appropriate improvements. When it comes time to talk budget, we've got a ready list of intersections to consider for the program. Since 2012, we've developed 3 intersection improvement program projects that have provided improvements at 20 intersections. Although we annually review the operations and safety of our transportation network, we develop projects every 4 years for this program. Smaller issues that are identified in between can be funded through other capital funded projects, such as our traffic signalization or spot improvements projects. The process shown on this slide is not much different than what we would perform for other capital transportation projects, with the exception that we bundle together multiple intersections or locations into one managed project. This adds complexity to what would seem like a simple intersection project, but in reality, multiple locations means multiple unique issues that take on their own identity. For that reason, we continually consider whether to bid intersections separately from the entire project in order to get them to construction faster, if they're simple. Like our other transportation capital projects, we take a comprehensive approach to scoping the intersection improvement projects. Our goal isn't simply to provide some turn lanes and walk away. We solicit feedback from local citizens regarding our designs. We consider and provide improvements for pedestrians and cyclists. We engage with our public works departments and HOA management companies on landscaping improvements, and we work with private utility companies to relocate and improve the conditions of underground and overhead utilities. These items do add time to the project, but they're an integral part of the program. Our past successes with the Intersection Improvement Program have us excited about our future projects. I'm happy to say we have kicked off our most recent Intersection Improvement Program project funded by the Shaping Cary's Tomorrow bonds. Design has already begun on 2 downtown intersections, along with other locations throughout Cary. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share some time with you and talk about our Intersection Improvement Program. Now, I'll hand off this presentation to Amir Nezarati. Amir will be the project manager for the project that we are here to talk about tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As we mentioned earlier, the other reason we are here tonight is to take action on the construction bid award for the second grouping of intersection improvements fiscal year 2016-2017. The biggest improvements of note are at High House Road and Jenks Carpenter, where we will be installing a new traffic signal, which is highly anticipated by residents in the area. We've also designed intersection overhauls at Cary Parkway and Waldo Rood, Kildare Farm Road at Advent Drive near Waverly Place, and Waldo Rood Boulevard at MacArthur Drive. The project was advertised for construction bids in August, where 4 bids were received. Fred Smith Company has been determined to be the lowest responsible bidder. Staff recommends council award the base bid for the construction of the intersection improvements project bid year 2020 to Fred Smith Company. High House Road at Jenks Carpenter and Cary Parkway and Waldo Rood are expected to start this fall, while Waldo Rood at MacArthur and Kildare Farm Road at Advent are expected to start in spring of 2021. This concludes our presentation, and with that, David and I are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open it up to council members for questions or comments.
I don't have a question, but I do agree with staff that this is much anticipated, and there'll be a lot of very happy citizens. I think we're going to tremendously improve safety on that High House corridor, especially since we have so many high school students that use that intersection, that pair of intersections. So very pleased about this.
Other comments?
Yeah, I've heard many citizens making comments about the exact intersection the staff were just talking about. So I'm really excited, and they have been asking me when. I know this is in the plan, but we're excited this is going to happen. Thank you for your hard work on this.
Any other comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid award to Fred Smith Company for these intersection improvements.
A second?
Motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Ure.
Aye.
Councilmember Liu.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
A vote affirmative as well. The motion is unanimous. Thank you for your work on this, gentlemen. We now move to our second and last discussion item. It's a rezoning case, 19 RZ 16 Silverton PDD Amendment Parcel G, the O&I portion. Planning Director Deborah Grannon will give the report and summarize recommendation from our Planning Board on behalf of its chair regarding the rezoning amendment. Council may take action on this item. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again. This is a request to amend approximately 2¼ acres of the Silverton Planned Development District. It's located at 1700 Evans Road. Tonight, you're going to hear staff's recommendation of consistency with the Imagine Cary Community Plan. And we're also going to report that the Planning and Zoning Board recommended this for consistency. But at the same time, we're going to point out some of the concerns that have been raised by staff about the project, and then report on the zoning conditions that have been offered to address those concerns. The property is located in the Silverton Planned Development District. It's Zone PDD Major. The current designation is office and institutional, and the site's also located in the Mixed-Use Overlay District. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the Silverton PDD to allow residential multifamily use. The mixed-use overlay district will remain. The preliminary development plan and associated PDD documents propose a maximum of 60 residential multifamily units, a maximum height of 55 feet, a minimum of 50% masonry on all building facades, a minimum of 1,200 square feet of community gathering space, one level of structured parking located below the residential units, a 20-foot wide type A buffer along the northwest and northeast property lines, a minimum planting height of 10 feet for understory trees in the streetscape. The LDO standard is 8 feet. And a public art feature located at the corner of Evans Road and Northwest Cary Parkway. The applicant is also seeking several modifications to LDO standards, and these include a parking rate of 1.77 spaces per unit, a streetscape width of 30 feet along Northwest Cary Parkway, and a 20-foot streetscape width along Evans Road. We'd like to point out the original PDD called for a 30-foot streetscape width along both of these frontages. This was at the time, however, when the use was designated for office and institutional uses. The LDO standard for residential use is a 50-foot streetscape along thoroughfares. So these modifications do represent a substantial reduction to streetscape standards. The PDD also allows for streetscape averaging. There's a utility easement located along the Northwest Cary Parkway frontage that could reduce the streetscape to as little as 15 feet in the area highlighted in orange on this image. And then there's also a required street side trail along this frontage, which is permitted to be both within the streetscape and the public right-of-way. So this could also further constrain the streetscape planting standards in this area. Staff shared these concerns and observations with the applicant really early in the process. And in response, they responded with increasing the percentage of masonry material on all building facades, as well as that condition I mentioned about increasing the height of the planting material in that streetscape to 10 feet. The property is adjacent to Northwest Cary Parkway, which is a 4-lane median divided roadway, and Evans Road, currently a 4-lane divided roadway with a future 6-lane median divided cross-section. And there is a future street side trail along the property frontage on Northwest Cary Parkway. As you may recall at the public hearing, some of the council members commented on the transition between the proposed development and the existing multifamily residential development to the north. Since that public hearing, the applicant has increased the perimeter buffer planting standard from a type B to a type A. And then there were other changes which included clarification to certain zoning conditions and site design standards. At their July meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board recommended consistency with the Imagine Cary Community Plan by a vote of 8-0. Board Chair Ryan Eads submitted a summary, which I'll read into the record. The board felt that residential use was a better use for this site, given the size constraints, and that this rezoning would complement the neighboring developments. One member commented that the applicant should be commended for including the art feature and felt that it would encourage walkability in this area. There were general concerns about the parking reduction and reduced streetscape buffer, but overall these were mitigated by the change to a type A buffer and additional data to justify a parking reduction. This concludes the summary provided by Mr. Eads. Since the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, the applicant offered additional conditions. First, to include a minimum of 2 energy efficient measures to the project, which would include at least 2 vehicular use charging stations, composting, recycling stations, or LED light fixtures. And a condition that prior to requesting a certificate of occupancy, the developer shall install wiring and conduit necessary to accommodate future solar panel connections in the building. In analyzing the request, staff noted that this most directly addresses policies in the Live, Work, and Shape chapters. The project would contribute to the housing choice and variety in this mixed-use center. The provision of multifamily units provides workforce housing, meeting a policy of the work chapter. However, we do note that by replacing the entitlement of office uses with residential, it does not support the policy of providing for locations for new or expanding firms. The Shape chapter supports denser development in certain areas of Cary, including employment mixed-use centers. So from a use perspective, multifamily residential is a logical transition from a major intersection to other similar multifamily developments. We do note that the streetscape reduction competes with natural buffer transitions and appearance policies, but then we look at the balance with that, with the provision for a public art element that helps to provide balance and address the appearance policy. When we look at the future growth framework map, we note that this is a small site in a much larger employment mixed-use campus, and that spans both sides of Weston Parkway from Chapel Hill Road to Interstate 40. Multifamily residential uses can be appropriate in this area, and the plan also recommends that multifamily developments should be part of a larger mix of uses, such as office, and be in the form of a walkable campus. So when we look at the campus as a whole, nearly half of this area is made up of office uses. So taking all of these factors into consideration, on balance, staff found that the request is consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan, as it supports or partially supports policies in the Live and Shape chapters. When we take a look at this in the context of the larger employment mixed-use campus, the conversion of this small area from office to residential is appropriate. We've noted our concerns about the streetscape reductions, but we also recognize that the applicant has offered some design elements such as structured parking, the increased masonry component, a commitment to a type A perimeter buffer, and then those increased planting standards in the streetscape. And that helped us balance the request and make our finding of consistency. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is on the line and available for your questions, as am I. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. I think that almost all of our council members probably have something to say about this, so I'll say my piece and I'll move on. First, I want to thank the applicant for making all these changes, making environmental changes, making aesthetic changes. They're crucial and they mean a lot. And this applicant has a great reputation and is vested in the town. However, I can't take that into account when I think about rezonings. And so I'm in my mind, I look at the rezoning as what's a compelling reason and doesn't match the Cary Community Plan. I just heard staff's interpretation of the Cary Community Plan and heard the Planning and Zoning's interpretation of the Cary Community Plan. My gut feel is that if you asked all the residents that were involved in creating the Cary Community Plan, I'd say most of them would not agree that 3 corners of an intersection should be multifamily. And that's what this does. And so while it might fit in the larger scheme of the Weston Office Park, I totally agree with that. I still have a problem with the use as a 3rd corner of multifamily in one intersection. And to me, that's not something I want to see. And so that's the reason why I can't support it. But I do appreciate this project has gotten much better just in the 2 weeks. I think it's been 2 weeks. Just in the 2 weeks since we tabled it. So that's a credit to the applicant and the conditions they've had it. But I will have a difficult time supporting this. Mr. France, I want to give you an opportunity since you're our remote council member this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. I too would like to thank our staff for all your work on this case. You know, so much of what, well, a lot of people don't see what goes into making the sausage on projects here in the town. And so much of that is done by the work of our staff who knows what our expectations are, what our community's expectations are. They do such good work to weed out a lot of the bad and make sure that things meet our plan and our high standards before we ever even get a chance to see it. So I applaud all their work on that. I thank the applicant for their efforts to further amend the plan to better meet our community's goals and the council's goals. I think this project's come a long way from where it started. And then I'd also like to thank my colleagues who I believe have helped to shape this project and make it a better project, especially in regards to the environmental conditions that have been offered. When I look at this, it's a multifamily project. I agree with you on that much, Mayor, but every time we've talked about multifamily projects in the past, we've always talked about those things that we want to see included with the project. Things like structured parking, larger gathering areas, better building materials, things that stand the test of time. And when I look at this project, they've checked those boxes. They've done that. You know, we've got the majority of parking under the building. They upped the masonry materials to 50% of the whole building all the way around, not just what you see from the street. Even the stormwater retention, the BMP is underground. I mean, that's significant. Twice the required community gathering space. And even the public art and the street treatments that they're going to be doing that will match and be in harmony with what they're doing on the other 2 quadrants, that I think when all this is done and built out and when those public art features and things are in place, I think this is going to be a really special place. I think when people drive through this intersection, they're just going to be, you know, wow, you know, where am I? You know, what is that development or what is over there? So I think that's very meaningful. It's a very small 2.5 acre site. This thing's been on the market for, I don't know, ever, 80s, and there's been no interest in it for office, no interest in it for anything commercial. We now have a high quality, reputable applicant and developer that wants to do something meaningful with it, provide housing for our citizens, future citizens, our kids, people fleeing other areas of the country that are coming here in droves because of our high quality of life and just the desirable community that we have. You know, as we all know, having an abundant supply of housing helps to keep housing prices low, which helps keep our community more affordable. The mayor, you talked about, you know, 3 quadrants being multifamily. I don't know if I agree with that. 2, yes, the one that's proposed, and then the one directly on the opposite quadrant. The other one's been approved and for assisted living and senior housing. So, yeah, while there might be a lot of units, I just don't know that I really consider that multifamily and then the just apartment complex sense of things. So there is a difference there. To me, it's made a compelling case. I think it's come a long way from where it was initially proposed. I think they check a lot of the boxes of what we want to see in future multifamily development in Cary. And I think our staff and this council and the applicant has done good work to get it to where it is today. So I look forward to supporting it.
Other comments?
Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first off, I do agree that this is so much better and different and all the, you know, wonderful things that we can say about this applicant. Obviously, we've talked about it multiple times. But I do have some concerns, and I haven't seen those allayed, and many of them are what you already spoke to. I'm very impressed with the improved buffer and the environmental conditions and the structured parking. We all know that that's key. And yes, the public art by a local artist, fantastic. But there's lots to love. But I still have concerns that we have a reduction of streetscape from 50 feet, which is our standard, down to 20 and 30 feet. I mean, that's a 50% reduction, 5% reduction, 10% reduction. Yeah, now even 20%, but this is pretty significant. Also, I understand there's a utility easement, but that utility easement was there when they put the option on the land. It's not like this is something new, right? So when they decided that they're interested in building this, that was already there. Yes, I understand that they're trying to fix, making compromises, adding masonry, a bit taller trees in the understory. But for me, that's a challenge. The other thing that I did a little bit of research, and I'd like to thank Deborah Grannon and the staff for this. We don't have a lot of places where we have 3 multifamily on a corner, and especially a corner like this that is such a wide and large intersections. We have a couple of places. Gregory and Maynard is a perfect example, but those were built many, many years ago, before the Cary Community Plan was put in place. I get it. This is a small development. It is 50 or 60 units. I keep hearing different numbers. But some of the other multifamilies are like townhomes, which to me is much, much closer to single family residential. It's not, I know it's by definition multifamily, but it feels differently. It feels different to me. So the problem that I have in some respects too is we're going down to a 70% reduction to our streetscape where it's going to only be 15 feet. So there are quite a few things for me that don't get me over the problems that I have with the streetscape. We've been very clear that streetscapes are important to us, especially in this corridor. Streetscapes are really important. A piece of art to me could be replaced tomorrow, could fall over the next day, who knows? But a tree and a streetscape, that adds to our environment. To me, that's important. And so all the compromises are great, and I really applaud this applicant. And I'm really trying to get there, but I just can't support it at this point.
Other comments?
No, I'll make comments. I presumed, yeah, did you want to make comments first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not that I disagree with you all on the streetscape buffer. I mean, obviously, I'd much rather have it be 50 feet. I'm looking at this site in totality and saying, let's look at it in the big picture, the increased masonry, the parking underneath the building, the BMP underneath the building, which I think, or underground, which I think is a huge benefit to this site. The applicants also honored some of the concerns that we expressed when it first came to us. For example, when it first came, it did not transition well to the neighborhood, to the north and the east. They amped that buffer up to a type A, which I think is going to help with that transition. The other thing I have to say is, I've been driving around looking at apartment complexes, and this is on me, but I should have asked staff to give me an inventory of those buffers for our different apartment complexes that are on roads, because even though it might be our standard for 50 feet, it must not be a standard that we adhere to all the time, because I'm seeing a lot of projects that are in Cary that are not using a 50-foot buffer. And maybe I'm wrong with the distances, but I was driving here on Old Apex Road, and the one that is, shoot, I can't remember the street name now, Chatham and Old Apex, has like a circular side to it. It's extremely attractive now. They have like a brewery on the first floor or something, craft beer place. Yeah, I drove by and I thought, that looks so good, because they paid attention to the aesthetics of the building. And I believe it's probably under 50 feet buffer, but it didn't bother me because the building looks so good. I think in this situation, when you look at the totality of the site and what they're offering, then it gets me over that buffer. And I don't mind having multiple corners with multifamily, because we always talked about the fact that we're going to have our taller buildings and our greater density, whether it be dense office or dense residential, we're going to have that right up next to the intersection. You wouldn't really want to put single family homes or townhomes, or even first story, like a strip mall would not be as nice here. So I do think that this is good. So I'll be voting for it, and I do want to thank y'all and the other council members who just went the extra mile to make sure that some of these, have these conversations and encourage the developer to submit some of these conditions. I think that really helps the project, and I just want to say that I admire the work that you've done here, so thank you. So yeah, it has my support, and it looks like this is going to be a tough one, though, maybe not a slam dunk. Oh, and I will say, I just want to say really fast, both of you mentioned the quality, I think two of you, Dawn, and you mentioned the quality of the developer. For citizens watching, this rezoning goes with the land and all the conditions that have been put into place, not with that developer. So if the developer were to sell this property, all those conditions go with it to the next owner, next developer.
Yeah, and I do share the concerns the mayor and Lori that, regarding the street scripts and regarding having 3 multifamily developments at that intersection, and I get it, and I appreciate all the work each council member and the staff members have put into this project. I appreciate the efforts that the applicant has been really receptive to the suggestions by the council members. And being someone new, I gained some experiences interacting with them. And I really appreciate that you put one of the first of this kind by offering this as a condition, installing the solar conduit into this development. So this is, I want this to be a model development project we can be really proud of, a project we can say, hey, we've done this in Cary, and I think this will encourage more developments, more developers to demonstrate the commitment to practice environmentally policies and put these environmental friendly structures into the developments. It demonstrates the commitment by the council that we listen to our citizens' concerns, and the citizens always ask us that you say, Cary is very pro-environment. So where do you start? What's the first project? And I'm looking forward for this to become a reality, so we can say, hey, this is the first project we have done it in Cary, and we want to see more of this in Cary. So I want to applaud the efforts that the developer has agreed to offer. So I look forward to voting for this project.
Mr. Urha or Mr. Smith?
Yeah, well, this is, in my opinion, not a very complicated rezoning. And I guess neither is my reason for opposing it. I simply believe that the existing zoning is more appropriate than the proposed zoning. Pretty much, that says it all. A non-residential use here, could possibly serve the existing nearby residents, and there are a lot of nearby residents, as we've established. A residential use 60 more units would only add more competition for the services that are already there. And I think the existing zoning fits better with the comprehensive plan. I can see how this fits with the plan also. You can massage it in different ways. I don't disagree with that. But I think the existing zoning is a better fit. And speaking of fits, the proposed development simply doesn't fit here without those significant streetscape reductions. And that's important to me. Of course, it's possible that if we have a non-residential use come in later, we'll also need some streetscape reductions. I understand that. But at least it would allow for the best use of the land, in my opinion. And I know it's been on the market for a long time as O&I and hasn't developed. But I just don't see the urgency right now to develop it as proposed. I appreciate the improvements that have been made along the way, especially the environmental ones. But I just don't see an overall benefit to the citizens of Cary, and I prefer to wait for a better fit.
Thank you, Mr. Urha. Mr. Smith? You don't have to speak. But
Yeah, I know.
You're the last one.
Yeah. The nice thing is you've all said it, and you've all said it so eloquently. As each of you spoke, I heard the pros and the concerns, and when you were speaking, I was like, Mayor, when you were speaking, I said, yeah, right on. And I heard John say, yeah, right on. And it's like, here we go. And it's all of a sudden I'm counting noses and saying, uh-oh. But I'm going to kind of echo a little bit with what Ed said. I mean, there's a part of me that is so impressed with the quality of the developer and the things that they're doing. But I kind of use this as a personal learning curve. We do so much because we care so much about the external. We care about, that look of masonry and all of the above. I don't want to repeat it all again. But in the end, I think we've reached a turning point that, for me, for a rezoning, it has to be significant and compelling. And as much as I applaud all of this, I was reviewing this stuff the other day, and I just can't get over, the old Peggy Lee song. Is that all there is? I mean, the reality is we have got to start to demonstrate not just that external look, not just that look of nice masonry, and the nice plantings. All those are important. They all complement the environment. But I think we really need to look at actual construction, what are the future buildings going to be doing to help us in the environment? And putting the conduit in is almost like, I hate to say this, but like too little too late. If you're going to put that in, I understand for the development community and for this developer in particular, it's a brave new world trying to have those panels on a multifamily. That is complicated. That is a challenge, no doubt about it. But if it was a regularly zoned place, fine, that's where we accept that standard. But if we're going to go into a rezoning, then I want those panels on the roof. I want to see a more direct commitment to all those things that we do for our environment. And they're wonderful. Don't get me wrong. The best management practices, all the things, it's personally tearing at me what to do with this one. But personally, I think it just feels like we're kicking the can a little bit down the road. And for me, I'm just not there yet with this one. And those are my thoughts.
Councilmember Smith, can I ask you a quick question? If there was, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, but if there were solar panels across the top, is that the thing that would have gotten you passed? Because I already told what it was for me, and you can't make a streetscape bigger. And I'm not trying to quote unquote win or lose, but is that a flip for you? I'm just curious if that was the.
Well, the answer I want to give you is like 20 minutes, but I'll just say yes. You know, I mean, I do think we have to send a message in how we build things. And we have sent a message on a lot of those external, the external look and feel. And I think we should be really proud of ourselves for that. But you know what? The world keeps changing, and we got to move the bar up, and I just want to see it up a little bit more. So, you know, the short answer is I know there's risk there. I know there's complications there. I would like to see something in the conditions or the wording that could address that. And I know this is 11th hour and 59th minute. We've dragged this out for many months, but I just, in the end, I had to look at you know, what we in Cary believe, and I just don't think. I'm sorry that this 2-acre parcel's caught in the middle of this crossfire, but it just doesn't sit well with me.
Jack, I'm glad you said it. I did have concerns in terms of, because this is a multifamily development, that for 60 units, that means 60 families in there. So if we have the solar conduit in there, so it would be really difficult for each and all the 60 families to come together and do coordinated efforts. So it will be great if the developer does it, rather than if they don't do this, they can only put in the conduit, and then they can only control the area, right, the common area, and if they can manage that part. But for the individual units, there's nothing they can do. But if they make a commitment that they install solars on the whole development, I think that would make a world of difference.
And before we get to a motion, I know that the applicant would like to speak. And I also want to remind council members that you are all very well aware of that we're voting not on amenities, but on a use. Mm-hmm. And that's got to be your decision, looking at our attorney. She wants to make sure that we're all aware of that. We're not voting on how it looks and feels. We're voting on the use, even though conditions were added. And I know Ms. Swidler would like to speak.
She's still on the line.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. It's been helpful hearing these comments tonight, and as we heard many comments at the public hearing regarding the use and regarding some concerns that were heard, because this is a PDD amendment, it is about the use, but it's about the whole package, as Councilmember Robinson said, because you have the PDP that comes with the significant conditions. And I'm glad that Councilmember France brought up what happens before we even get to the public hearing, and certainly what happens before we get before you tonight. We filed this case in July of last year, and we worked with staff on many issues and concerns before it ever came to the table, and your staff did a great job on addressing each of those and kind of feeling the pulse of what issues are important to the town, and encouraging applicants to include conditions to help make these uses a better transition, a better modification of a vision that was put in place 3 decades ago, as was done with this case. The PDD was created, and this parcel has sat vacant for that time. And so one of the things I think, of course, it is within the council's purview to look at what use is appropriate for the site. but to also look at what, if the zoning is to change, how can we make it the best use and the best way to integrate it into the area. And I want to note that with the streetscapes in particular, the PDD today only requires a 30-foot streetscape for this parcel. So if this is built for the use it's intended to originally in the Silverton PDD, you would only be getting a 30-foot streetscape. It is only because it's changing to multifamily that normally includes the larger 50-foot, and that's why your reduction. So we're asking for a reduction back to the original intent of the buffer here. And when you combine that with all of the changes that we've made in response to staff comments throughout this process, the structured parking and things that have been added here today, those were done in a over a year-long process. And then since the February public hearing, we heard a lot of those comments, and I think we showed you how we made those changes since the public hearing. The solar and environmental measures have certainly grown in prominence, but the specific solar request was only a very recent one. And had we been asked to incorporate that during the public hearing, at the same time we were asked to consider adding to the buffers and what else we could do about the masonry, we could have kind of had time to bake all of those things into the project. It's difficult at this hour to commit to something that it will frankly take months to determine whether a solar panel and how that program would work here. And so what we want to do is deliver something that's not only meaningful, but can work. And I don't want to add a condition without knowing and having the full study and the town resources of how that would be received in the solar installation on a multifamily, which is different than a single family. And so that's why you have the conduit offer. And what it does is it's the first step to allowing those solar panels to be installed by this long-term operator of this multifamily development. So, I don't want you to think that this was something that we're not taking seriously. We are, but in the over 17 months or 16 months as it's been pending, this was something that was brought up rather late, and we're trying our best to accommodate it. And I think it can serve as a very positive precedent to going forward as the town explores how to incorporate that better. So I wanted to make sure that all of those aspects were taken into account tonight, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you.
Mayor, I've been working with staff and with Jamie on this last couple of days, and I can confirm that it became about time. And I think Jamie's worked about 24 hours in the last 2 days on this, and particularly in the solar area. So I do know that, and there were some things that we would have done that we just ran out of time too. So I just wanted to substantiate that.
May I ask a question of Jamie? I mean, Jamie, it looks like this is going down tonight. Would you rather have more time so that you can try to address the solar panel issue?
Sure, and I think we much prefer to table it rather than not have the council support. I do just want to caution that unlike increasing a tree caliper, committing to installing panels where it's never been done in the town of Cary on a multifamily site is something that is difficult to fix and in 2 weeks. But we'll commit to investigating it and reporting back. And I know we'll work with the staff to figure out what's possible.
And I'll ask the follow-up. This is an indefinite tabling you would prefer?
Well, I don't know that's...
That gives you an option. You can come back in 2 weeks or 2 years or whatever. Well,
Take
not
it, Jamie.
2 years, but I mean,
Can I say something?
That we can...
Well, Jamie, if you elect to table, I think the big question, as was brought up by Ms. Liu, is if you're going to make the effort to put the conduit in for each unit, and you're now making the argument, it's not really practical for a multifamily, or it's never been done before, then why are we putting it in? What is an individual unit going to do with this conduit? Have one little solar panel up there? So, just make sure the argument about whatever you're going to do next, that's my troubling point about the conduit. In the zeal to react to every concern by us on the council, I just didn't see where that added value add. So I'll leave it up to the developer, and I'll leave it up to the council in the vote. I wasn't really, I kind of got a hint of the count, but I just think if you're going to offer the conduit, then hopefully you've done the homework that says that type of a building can handle,
Jack,
the panels.
Jack, that came from us. And so the reason why they did it was trying to be responsive to the council and trying to meet all the different concerns. And so it certainly wasn't offering. And they, as Jamie said, were very reluctant about being able to commit to something they didn't know they would do. They worked as hard on it as we did to try to make it work, and just ran out of time. So just want to make sure that we understand
that's a fair point. I
it
appreciate
came from
that.
us. Yeah.
Because it does come across, super on the surface as a bit disingenuous if you're putting something in and now you're hearing the argument that it doesn't work. So I understand.
And just to clarify, I wasn't trying to say that it doesn't work. I just meant that the way the condition is written, it would allow us to put it in the building and possibly used in common areas so that before building permit. So we would have time between now and building permit to determine where it would go, but we're happy to table.
Just question, I heard Ms. Bush's concerns regarding the buffer, and those are legitimate, and I appreciate those. But I'm getting the sense from at least a couple council members now that they don't want to approve this project because they're not going to do something that's not required by our ordinance in regards to solar panels. The applicant has gone above our ordinance to try to address council members' concerns and put the conduit and the infrastructure in there should they find it's viable sometime later on in the process or down the road, but they're hesitant to commit to it just yet. I've only been here 12 years, but I don't ever remember us tabling or denying a multifamily project because they didn't put solar panels on the roof.
That's a fair point, Don. But at the same time, what we don't keep track of is the fact that with a rezoning, we're looking at the use, and we keep going down. What we're trying to do in our zeal to make a use that's not what it's zoned for work, I think we're down that path. I think it's kind of a moot point if we haven't done that in the past. The point is it's a different use, and conditions have surfaced because people are trying to show the value of putting a different use there. And it's really as simple as do all of these features merit us changing the use? And that's a personal decision. But the fact that we may not have done it because of solar panels, I don't think we should get lost in the weeds of the solar panels. The issue is, has this developer, in my mind, have they done enough that demonstrate it's worth changing the use? It's really that simple, and that's a personal decision.
Well, I don't recall hearing anything about solar panels at the public hearing. I don't recall hearing anything about buffer width, streetscape specifically, at the public hearing.
I brought it up.
And that's a fair point.
And I know that the applicant has reached out to people. Some have met and had conversations, some have refused. And now here we are, like you said, Jack, at the 11th hour and 59th minute. And now it's just more pile on.
May I make a suggestion? If the applicant, as Councilmember Robinson asked, since there seems to be still some discussion and some heart-to-heart and trying to figure out what we like and what we don't, I guess what I'll do is make a motion to table this if the applicant is willing, and I did hear the applicant say yes. So I'll make a motion to table it to some indefinite time to be named, and we'll see how that goes.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion to table indefinitely. Okay, roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem France.
No.
Councilmember Robinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Yerha.
No.
Councilmember Lou.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Bush.
Yes.
I vote affirmative as well. The motion passes 5-2 to table indefinitely. I think I got that right. So we look forward to staff and the applicant and council members without a quorum, working together
If they can help us relocate
see if we
an old
can
house,
address
we'll vote for it.
to see if we can address some of these concerns. If there are no other items, we have no closed session this evening, and if there are no other items from council this evening, I will adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Sean.